Software was known for its innovation in game development. Titles like Commander Keen showcased smooth scrolling, while Wolfenstein 3D and Doomed helped pioneer the first-person shooter genre. However, on June 22, 1996, the shareware version of Quake was released. Development on Quake began as early as 1995, but the original concept for Quake dates back to the days of Commander Keen, known as The Fight for Justice. It was initially planned as a sequel to the Commander Keen trilogy, featuring a character named Quake who possessed great power wielding thunderbolts in the Ring of Redemption. The Fight for Justice was intended to be a role-playing game, with puzzles and choices that went beyond simple yes or no answers. However, the project didn't progress further due to the need for more advanced technology. But when Doom 2 was released years later, the team at id Software believed that technology had advanced significantly to begin working on Quake. John Romero and Carmack started developing Quake Ed on Next Step machines while contemplating the appearance and rules of the game. Quake transitioned from being an RPG game to a first-person shooter as id Software prioritized action above all else, intending to create an evil and brutal experience. However, the development process was challenging due to the lack of proper game design, which led to conflicts, and ultimately resulted in the departure of the majority of the original lineup, particularly notable figures like John Romero and Sandy Petersen. Some ideas did not make it to the final game due to the chaos at id Software, but the interpretations of those ideas can vary from person to person. For example, Tim Willits claimed that the multiplayer maps were his idea, and that he used fragments of maps to create them. On the other hand, Romero refuted Tim's claims, stating that it was ill-advised, and the maps were specifically crafted for deathmatch. Willits was only involved in 4 out of 9 levels. Romero wasn't the only one. John Carmack has stated that he doesn't recall the conversation between Romero, Willits, and himself, but trusts Romero's recollection of events. It is also worth noting that Sandy Petersen mentioned the planned inclusion of a hammer weapon, and the potential for giant boss battles in later episodes. On the last day of development, Romero was alone at work, compressing and uploading the shareware release. During the chaotic development, id had released a deathmatch test called Q-Test in February 1996. It featured 3 deathmatch arenas, a turtle icon, and goofy sound effects? Yeah, you could tell it's a placeholder. While initially a tech demo and a deathmatch test, the Quake community quickly embraced modding the game. One example of a modified level to demonstrate this is One Evil Way, a version of the first map where monsters and weapons were sprinkled in. The monster data was obtained beforehand, and a tool known as the Entity Editor was created, enabling the addition of weapons and monsters to an existing map. One would even go as far as to create a simple map manually. While the game tools were not yet available, this map, titled First Quake Level from Scratch, took a significant amount of time to create. Not only that, but people even created player and monster skins before the game was released. Q-Test became extremely popular leading up to the shareware release, which in turn gained significant popularity. Quake received ports for various PCs and Pacific hardware at the time. The only console port was released for the Nintendo 64 by Midway Games. Due to the hardware limitations, some of the levels were not featured in this version. Additionally, the Nintendo 64 port included 2-player deathmatch, with an exclusive deathmatch arena. Quake was a highly demanding game for its time, and Pentium processors were recommended to fully enjoy it. Running Quake on a 486 class processor would cause the game to become a slideshow. You'd be lucky to achieve somewhat playable performance on a high-end 486, especially combined with a 3DFX Voodoo card. Even then, Quake also ran somewhat decently on low-end Pentium machines. If you are using older hardware, it is recommended to use DOS or WinQuake. If you have a 3DFX or other 3D accelerator at its time, then I recommend GL Quake for extra performance. However, if you're using modern hardware, then I would recommend checking out Night Dives Remaster. Or if you desire a source port to enhance your experience, then I highly recommend trying out Iron Whale, a fork of QuakeSpasm that offers optimized performance and allows the ability to emulate software rendering and non-square pixels. It's also worth noting that Quake had received 2 mission packs, namely Scourge of Armagon by Hypnotic Software and Dissolution of Eternity by Rogue Entertainment. However, this topic would be covered in a future video. Starting up the game greets you with an introduction map, where you select difficulties using slip gates. The difficulties range from easy, medium, hard, to nightmare. Like many id Software games of its time, action was a top priority over anything else, and that includes the lore. The protagonist, simply named Quake Ranger, receives a phone call at 4 in the morning, summoning them to a secret installation. You arrive there by 5:30, and the commander informs you about this remarkable device called the Slipgate, assigning you a task to accomplish. An unearthly enemy codenamed Quake has been infiltrating the bases with death squads, engaging in killing, stealing, and kidnapping, preparing for Operation Counter-Strike, only to find out that the base had been overrun. Now it is up to you to grab your shotgun and enter the Slipgate. Your task is simple: kill everything that moves, hunt down keys, and face off with Quake, who turns out to be a massive Lovecraftian creature known as Shub-Niggurath. Quake's arsenal comprises the standard weapons, the single-barreled shotgun that is effective at long range, and the double-barreled shotgun that deals greater damage up close. Honestly, it may not possess the same level of coolness as the Doom 2's Super Shotgun, but it gets the job done. During that time, one of the more intriguing weapons was the nail gun, a 2-barreled machine gun that fired nails. There was also a variation called the Super Nail Gun, also known as the Perforator. However, it featured a 4-barrel chain gun design that shoots out 2 nails per shot, consuming more ammo in the process. Additionally, there was the Grenade Launcher, which launched bouncing grenades that exploded upon impact, and the Rocket Launcher, a workhorse weapon designed to blow things up. Finally, the Thunderbolt served as the game's ultimate weapon, a rapid-firing lightning gun that electrocuted enemies to death. Quake also features a set of power-ups, with one of the most popular being the Quad Damage, which boosts the player's damage by 4 times, making your weapons very overpowered. Another notable power-up is the Ring of Shadows, which grants invisibility to the player, although their eyes are still visible. The Pentagram of Protection provides invulnerability for a limited time. It's also worth mentioning that the armor indicator on the HUD is displaying 666. Additionally, there's the Biohazard Suit, which allows the player to swim in acid without taking damage. Now, power-ups and weapons like these wouldn't be as enjoyable without monsters to shoot at. The enemy roster is a mixed bag of zombified soldiers and enforcers, medieval knights, and ogres wielding chainsaws and grenade launchers. But wait, there's more. We also have Scrags that float around shooting green blobs of poison at you, Shamblers that claw at you and cast lightning, Fiends that charge at you, and Vors who even are more brutal than the Revenants from Doom 2. Seriously, the projectiles the Vors throw at you are extremely challenging to dodge without taking cover. Oh, and let me tell you about this blue fuck. These blue globs of shit bounce around like crazy and unleash splash damage when you kill them. Episode 4 is the only episode that features these assholes, and there's plenty of them. However, episode 4 is forgiving if you know where the power-ups are at. Oh, and let's not forget about the rotting fish swimming underwater, by the way. Quake featured only 2 boss fights, and rather than simply gunning them down, players had to perform specific tasks to defeat them. For example, in the case of Chthon, players had to electrocute the boss to secure victory. Speaking of episodes, the levels in Quake were indeed enjoyable to play. As mentioned, Quake lacked proper game design, resulting in level design that felt scattered and inconsistent, much like the enemy roster. The game is divided into 4 episodes, and upon completing all of them, the player is rewarded with a final level. The thematic progress of the levels is noteworthy, starting with futuristic tech bases to transitioning to medieval environments like castles. Finally, players delve into more mystical and runic settings such as dungeons. Combine that with the soundtrack created by Nine Inch Nails. It is well known that the folks at id Software were metalheads, which explains why the Doom soundtrack had elements reminiscent of Metallica, Slayer, and Alice in Chains. In contrast, Quake's soundtrack aimed for a more atmospheric vibe, enhancing the game's overall ambience. Not only did Nine Inch Nails create a dark, atmospheric soundtrack, but they also contributed to the sound design of Quake, adding a unique touch to the overall sound design. Quake's gameplay mechanics also had a significant influence on popularizing techniques such as rocket jumping and bunny hopping. Rocket jumping includes aiming a rocket launcher at the player's feet and using the explosion to propel themselves to higher places across distances. Rise of the Triad was one of the first games to introduce this technique. Bunny hopping, on the other hand, combines strafe running and jumping to maintain and increase momentum, allowing players to move more quickly and fluidly through the game's environments. These techniques added an extra layer of skill and creativity to the gameplay, and they have since become iconic elements of the Quake series and other first-person shooters. To be honest, I find Quake's single-player experience to be on par with Doom. Similar to Doom, Quake continues to have user-made add-ons for the single-player mode being created to this day, such as Arcane Dimensions. If you are interested in exploring such content, I highly recommend checking out Quaddicted, a platform dedicated to hosting and showcasing these types of user add-ons. With the release of GL Quake, it allowed Quake to run on 3D accelerators like the 3DFX Voodoo, thus increasing the demand for games utilizing 3D accelerators. Prior to this, games relied heavily on the CPU for graphics processing. However, with APIs like Glide, the graphical workload was shifted to the 3D accelerator, freeing up the CPU and enabling smoother frame rendering. Even the oldest source port was meant for an earlier 3D accelerator named the Rendition Varight, named V-Quake. Now, this isn't a Quake video without mentioning its addicting multiplayer experience. You start out with the cooperative and deathmatch modes, with a simple form of team play on top of that. However, the network code was the only major hurdle that Quake faced upon its initial release. The network code of Quake was specifically designed for internet play, and it included support for IPX, modems, and serial cables. Notably, Quake was one of the games to implement support for the TCP/IP protocol, which remains in use to this day. Quake's multiplayer, commonly referred to as NetQuake, was often a frustrating experience for internet play, particularly on dial-up connections. Players frequently encountered input lag for movement and actions, and good luck getting a decent experience when playing with someone from a different country. John Carmack later admitted that this problem should have been addressed before the game's release. However, it went unnoticed as he and other developers had high-speed internet connection, which did not expose the issues experienced by users with slower connections. Gaming services like Total Entertainment Network and Empath's MPlayer made attempts to address the issue, but that was before John Carmack would introduce Quake World towards the end of 1996. Quake World, a multiplayer-only client for Quake, significantly improved the network code by implementing client-side prediction. This technique effectively mitigated the negative effects of high-latency connections that were prevalent at the time. Client-side prediction gained popularity as it provided a smoother gameplay experience for both high and low latency connections. Quake World played a significant role in popularizing internet play, to the extent that it has inspired a team of 3 programmers, Joe Powell, Tim Cook, and Jack Matthews, to develop QuakeSpy. This program greatly simplified the process of finding Quake servers on the internet, which had proven to be challenging. These successive GameSpy eventually led to its inclusion with Quake World, and it later evolved into GameSpy by the time Hexen 2 was released. Quake's game logic was contained in a file called progs.dat. When John Carmack released the source code for progs.dat, it opened up possibilities for the Quake community to create modifications. These modifications ranged from server enhancements like Combat Teams Extreme to deathmatch bots like Stephen Polge's Reaper bot. Some modifications even evolved into full-blown gameplay mods, like Quake Rally for instance. But some eventually became popular franchises like Team Fortress and Counter-Strike. Quake's deathmatch mode played a significant role in the influencing rise of esports, where professional players compete in tournaments for prizes. This impact was evident in the establishment of the QuakeCon convention by id Software, which included tournaments organized by the company itself. During this time, Dennis Thresh Fong emerged as one of the most renowned professional gamers, gaining popularity and recognition from the gaming community. Fong, initially known as Threshold of Pain, started playing Doom at the age of 16. However, due to the 8-character limit, he shortened his name to Thresh. He gained some recognition when he had emerged as the champion in the Microsoft-sponsored Doom tournament, with a Hexen deathmatch serving as the final round, which also served as a release party for the game. However, his biggest achievement came at the Red Annihilation tournament in 1997. In an impressive display, he defeated Entropy with a score of 14 to -1. As a reward, he was presented with John Carmack's Ferrari. A fucking Ferrari from the programmer god himself. Quake's multiplayer had a significant influence on various aspects of gaming. However, if you're interested in experiencing it for yourself, there are some good news and bad news. The good news is that there are still people playing multiplayer Quake to this day. However, the bad news is that finding active servers may not be as straightforward as it once was. When you open up Quake World, you may encounter mostly empty servers, although there are some that occasionally has players. But I recommend joining a Discord community that organizes events for Quake's multiplayer to enhance your experience. Quake World also has its own versions of source ports, and I recommend checking out EZQuake, which you can find in the description below. Despite the chaos at id Software and the lack of proper game design, Quake became a massive success in the gaming scene. It played a significant role in driving the demand for 3D accelerators, shaping up internet play and spawning successful franchises while also contributing to the rise of esports. That about wraps up this video. Quake and Doom had a huge influence on my life as well. They have introduced me to a plethora of all sorts of things that I thoroughly enjoyed. I would love to hear about your stories and memories of this game in the comment section down below. Till next time, peace out.